inside all of the subdisciplines of political science, there's this really big concept that we're going to encounter again and again, and that is this concept of the state. The state. So, what is this? The state is kind of one of your basic institutions when it comes to thinking about the biggest level of government. And so oftentimes we'll talk about state most extensively in the subfields of comparative politics and in the subfield of international relations. Because states will be those kind of basic building blocks. As we think back to our early mini lecture, it's going to be the source of most political power. So let's kind of talk about a little bit. So what is the state? It's kind of this fuzzy definition. So if I start talking about states, you may think about things like Florida or Kentucky, or, take your state. But this is actually not at all what we mean. What we're talking about are things like the U.S., the United Kingdom, or Canada. This is what we mean generally when we talk about a state. It is that biggest, most important government institution. So what makes the state government different than all these other things we might start by talking a class out with? Good question. You see, there's this really famous guy. His name is Max Weber. And yeah, I know that's a W, but you actually pronounce it with a V because he's German. And in German, W's are V, so it's Max Weber. Anyway, so Max Weber, does a lot. He's a political sociologist, is what he is, and he gives this really cool speech. And this is from Politics of Education, and he says that a state is a human community that successfully claims the monopoly of the legitimate use of physical force within a given territory. Whew. There's a lot of things going on there. I'm sure you can hear that, class. So what do we mean by all of this on the front of a state? Well, what this means is that in the world that we live, the state is the thing that we allow to lock people up, right? To put them in prison, to fine them, to tax them, right? It has armies and police. This is the state. So it's the human community that we say, yeah, it's okay, i.e. legitimate, for them to use physical force, all this kind of stuff, inside of a specific area. Think like the geographic boundaries that you might have learned in geography. So there have been some evolutions of states through time, but I don't want to spend a lot of time on this in an intro class. Instead, what we want to talk about is just some of the things that characterize the state that you're going to see. So when you look around the world, you look at the United States, you look at the United Kingdom, you look at Germany, Russia, China, etc., you're going to be able to say, oh, that's what makes a state state. And there's kind of three big things on that front. The first is it has a centralized control force. That means the modern state has police and army. And it heads to one thing, right? It's also going to have a bureaucratic organization. So think about any country in the world, and you think about their state. You're going to think about maybe Parliament in the United Kingdom, or you're going to think about Vladimir Putin in Russia. You're going to think about, right, in the United States, you're going to think about a Congress and a presidency and a court system. And you're going to think about the things that carry out those issues, like in the United States, the Environmental Protection Agency. And they're going to provide things. They're going to provide public goods. We expect them to have services, roads, etc. That's why we're willing to deal with that monopoly power of force, generally speaking. So, back to this Max Weber guy, who, by the way, don't you think that we should really bring beards back? I'm a Beard fan. Anyway, point being is that whole legitimacy thing that he talked about. So why would we accept a human community that can shoot us or put us behind bars or anything else like that? And the answer is that there, according to Weber at least, three major reasons. There are traditional reasons, there are charismatic reasons, and there are legal rational reasons. Now, he actually used longer words for these, but we'll use the simpler ones for now. In a nutshell, tradition means that you accept it because it's always happened. Why do you fold your hands when you pray? Or why might I decide to, I don't know, drive on the right side of the road? Or these are kind of traditions. And we accept them not because anybody forces us to, but because we've just always done it. And that's what our parents and our parents and our parents' parents did. And so we don't even think about it. So one reason that we might accept a leader, king, monarch, could be tradition. Another is charismatic. Someone has such a power of speaking and charisma that we all go along with that individual. So, for instance, this can take positive or negative views. So if you think about the Old Testament, for instance, Moses would be the one that Weber pointed to. If you look in modern or more negative terms, you might say Hitler, right? It's the person. So it's history, it's the person, or it could be legal rational. It's the institutional law. I'm not I'm not sure that the Constitution is perfect, but we like it, we accept it because it is an institutionalization, a legal rational reason for existing. It can be changed and altered, and that gives it legitimacy. So like a constitution. Now, when we look around the world, we're going to see that not all states look the same, right? So the United States is not the same as the UK. They've got very different ways of functioning. And we'll talk about that a little bit, but not too much. If you like this is actually a lot of what we do, as you might imagine, in comparative government, right? Comparing is right in the name. But we can just quickly see that states can be different. And some of the big ways they can be different is how strong or weak they are. Can they get everything done they want to or not? Capacity is the ability of a country to get those things done. So think for a second. So capacity would be the power to carry out the basic tasks providing security and reconciling freedom and equality. So the ability to carry out the things that it wants to do. The last one is autonomy, right? So can the state act apart from people? So the more it can act apart from the people, the more autonomous it is, and the less it can act apart from people, the less autonomous it is. Now, the last big one that we want to cover here is the difference between a unitary or a federal. So in unitary states, like the United Kingdom, all power falls to one institution, like Parliament. In a decentralized, it can fall to lots of different institutions. So you might have states, you might have Congress, and a president, and governors, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. So in unitary states, one institution, one thing has all the power. In decentralized states, lots of different things might have different amounts of power. Now, this can get confusing. So how do you refer to people and institutions and states and governments? We're going to need to do that in this class. Well, we have a shorthand for that, and we call that a country. Country is when we refer to the government, the regime, the state, the people, the nation, all in one easy, handy, dandy definition. So when we're talking technically, as a scientist, operationalizing our terms carefully, the state and the country are different things. State is part of what we mean when we talk about a country, but it's not everything. The state is referring to the institution, the human community that has a monopoly control of violence. And that's enough for today.